From the Corner Office is brought to you by Synovus Bank, championing business growth through trusted, relationship-driven banking throughout the Gulf Coast region. On this week's episode of From the Corner Office, we are talking to Dara Shareef, whose business success story is centered on risk. He took a big chance, for one, when he left a cushy Wall Street job to move to Tampa to work for a mergers and acquisition firm, Benchmark International, that was then mostly unknown. The move has paid off handsomely. The Business Observer writes often about business leaders and entrepreneurs who take big risks. To read those stories and more, subscribe to the Business Observer. Go to businessobserverfl.com to sign up. Hello and welcome to the Business Observer's From the Corner Office podcast. I'm Mark Gordon, managing editor of the Business Observer. Today's guest is Dara Shareef, a managing partner at Benchmark International. Dara, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mark. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be a good conversation. We're going to talk about Benchmark and we're going to talk more about your career and leadership and some lessons that you've learned. Before we get into that and what Benchmark is, I want the audience to get to know you a little bit. We're going to start with 3 rapid fire questions. Okay, here we go. If you had a time machine, would you go back in time or into the future, and why?
Wow, that's a good one. Good way to kick it off. So I think I'm incredibly fascinated by the future. I think we all are, but I also really want to make sure that I'm present and in the moment as these things happen, especially for my future. So I'm going to lean toward the past. That I'd love to have been there with Churchill in those moments before we entered the war and been a part of those discussions, what was going on in terms of trying to, maintain the freedom of the free world while these folks on the other side were trying to reign supreme. So I'd love to be there for the time when Newton was dominating, the smartest person probably in the history of the world, or my Lord, was Socrates an actual man? I'd love to be there to see if he actually existed or if he existed through his pupils and the birth of Christ. I mean, there's some incredible moments in our history that I think drive everything that we are today and everything that we know. I'd love to have been there. So I'll favor the past.
Yes, I like it. All right, a little bit of a lighter question. What is your favorite meal to cook or prepare?
Wow. Favorite meal to cook or prepare? There's a couple. I mean, my mac and cheese is pretty good. My grilled cheeses, I'm pretty basic. But I make a vegetable korma that my daughter, one of my daughters, is absolutely in love with. So I'll probably say the veggie korma.
Veggie korma, all right, excellent. Plus, hey, nothing wrong with some good mac and cheese. Okay, we're going technical. Have you used AI or Chat GPT in the last week? And if so, for what did you use it for?
I actually use it pretty often for a guy of my vintage. I've only recently gotten into it, probably in the last year or so. But, when the big, beautiful bill came out, right, it was a great way to sort of get hey, what are the implications? What are the implications on M&A? What are the implications, across the board? And so it serves a really good purpose that way. I'm fascinated by the intersection of demography and economics. So I'll often look into, sort of the replacement rate, birth rate of various countries to see how that might impact demographics and economics, geopolitical component. So chat's great that way.
Using it for research. All right, excellent, good. Well, we're gonna segue into leadership. Before we get there, tell us about Benchmark International. You guys had a big news announcement recently, which we'll get into in a second, regarding a hockey team. But before we get to that, tell us about Benchmark International and what the company is about.
Sure. So Benchmark International is a sell-side M&A firm. We've been around for 16 or 17 years. We're born out of the UK. And our founders came to the U.S., as they often do, and landed in Central Florida and realized very quickly that they needed to get back to work, that they don't have it in them to retire. I think, Stephen King was probably in his late 30s at that point. So started Benchmark in the U.S. out of Tampa. And if you fast forward, 15 years, we're now in 3 continents, 15 offices across many many geographies, many countries, 5 in the U.S. So, we're sell-side M&A shop. We sell businesses for a living, as simply as that. Agnostic. Lower middle market and middle market firms. We don't do, multi-billion-dollar deals. That's not our sweet spot. Tend to work a lot with founders. Our message, our delivery platform really does resonate probably best with family-owned, founder-led businesses, though we're, very happy to take to market anything from a private equity fund as well.
So you're getting in front of those companies saying, okay, what's the exit strategy? And then you're guiding them through that exit strategy.
Right. So we'll take them to market, right? So we'll do a deep dive on the business, lay out the story in the form of a SIM, a confidential information memorandum and teaser, and then bring them to market and talk to hundreds to thousands of buyers, narrow that field, solicit offers, work those offers against each other, create some competitive tension, drive the LOI negotiation, get it under letter, and then drive that diligence process all the way through to closing.
Got it. All right. And Benchmark International had a splashy news announcement recently regarding the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I've heard. It was 11 months in the making, so it was one of the harder secrets I've had to keep. So obviously
that's a long time to keep a secret like that. Wow, good for you.
It was. When you have Blue Owl owns the majority now of the Vitic Sports Group, and they're an incredible private equity fund, and you have M&A guys on this side. So you can imagine what that negotiation looked like. Of course, we're on we have great terms. They're a great group, and we have a great relationship now. But a lot of back and forth, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
This is for us, as a privately privately held business, this is not a line item on a marketing spend for us. This is a capital investment. We're making an investment in our future, in Tampa's future. We really want to make sure we're putting our money where our mouth is. And, we've built a team around this project where we're going to, make sure that we're delivering value every single time that business is open, that arena is open. So this was a real commitment for a long time from Benchmark to our community and to the Vitic Sports Group.
Yeah, no, it's really cool and a big deal for sure. How did you get into this line of work in terms of M&A and, representing businesses and the kind of things you talked about? How did you get into this field?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I hadn't done exactly this until I got to Benchmark. So I had spent my prior career about 10 years as a venture capitalist. So doing deals, soliciting deals, I'd read 500 business plans, usually the executive summary first, a year. And, we'd invest in a couple, right? And then, so a lot of experience evaluating businesses, investing in the businesses, and then sitting on the boards, hopefully helping to drive a future exit. That was what I did for a long time. Also, what that does often when you're working in early stage VC is you end up in C-level roles, right? You jump into a portfolio company and you're a stopgap as the CFO, the COO, and the CEO at different times. I did all of those things. So I got really good experience, buying and even selling companies, driving operating companies, and also sitting on the boards, dictating either a sale or a purchase. But I had never actually been the folks in the middle facilitating a deal. All the while, I'd been told that I had the skill set to do this effectively, and that you're really good at that deal part. Maybe you should be doing that part alone. And I said, well, maybe. And eventually, it became clear to me that was really my passion. And so when the Benchmark opportunity came along, it really did coincide with our desire to move from New York down to Florida. And I took this role, and Benchmark wasn't what it is now when I got there. They were very early in their development. I would say sort of bottom of the first inning. So I got a chance to a lot of folks laid that groundwork already before I got there. And I got a chance to come in there and make a hopefully a decent impact on a really developing and growing business. And where we are today is pretty incredible.
Yeah. And so it's interesting, you've seen different sides of leadership, right? You mentioned like the C-suite side. So you've seen it there. You've helped out there, you've read business plans, and now you're analyzing, deals for your clients. Big picture question, we're going to switch to leadership. How do you define leadership? What does leadership mean to you?
Well, it's about accountability, right? At the end of the day, it's about inspiring folks to be better. But at the end of the day, when everyone is pointing fingers, it's got to be that the leader is the person that raises his or her hand and says, "Hey, this is on me." That means success, and that means failure. I think it means courage to be, to lead and to make tough decisions, even under very difficult circumstances. Leaders are decisive. They're willing to make decisions with limited information, and hopefully they have a team that's effective enough where if you have to make some changes along the way or really course correct, that you're swift enough to do that. And I think that's the key, that decisiveness and willing to own that result, whether it goes really, really well or maybe not so well or anywhere in between.
To be out there up front about it. Who's influenced your leadership the most? Who in your life has influenced your leadership style and approach the most?
Yeah, I'm not a finished product, so I'm being influenced every day. I mean, I think if I'm looking back at the people who are probably most formative, my mother was, my biggest fan, and I would say she taught me empathy. My stepfather, he still is so calm under pressure. I got that from him. My high school football coach, probably would get arrested for what he did to me today, but he taught me just how to outwork the room. He brought toughness out of me and grit. So I can still, 52 years old, I can outgrind anybody on my team, even at this point. It takes more out of me, but those are the folks who probably inspired me most. I mean, I look at folks like Churchill, who I just admire so much, his courage of his conviction, his absolute conviction in what he was doing at all times. I take leadership out of books that I've read, and so I get it from my kids. My kids teach me every day how to be kind, even when folks around you are unkind. So I do try to draw from the folks around me, and so many people influence me even today.
Yeah, that's so true. But I want to go back to your mom and your football coach, but about our kids. I have a 17-year-old, and we do learn from them. The kindness is a really good point. Like, I could be very judgy, I think, of others sometimes as a parent, and he'll say, "Why are you so mean?" And I'm like, "Wait a minute. Okay, step back." Not that I say that publicly, of course. Your mom, you learned empathy from your mom. Tell us about growing up and kind of some examples of what you learned from your mom.
Yeah, so my mother, I lost her a few years ago. She was born Massachusetts. She was half Native American, and the rest was Irish and English. They had zero money, even though that family goes back to the Mayflower. Dr. Samuel Fuller was my mother's mother was a Fuller. But she was an orphan. So she really knew how to see the other side. I call her an empath. She had the ability to put herself in the other person's shoes. And, she taught me that from the very get-go. And I have it in me I make fun of everything. I joke, myself especially.
Yes.
That's just my nature. But, I always try to make sure there's never even a hint of meanness in it. Because, you don't know what someone else is going through. Even when, someone is doing something that is not so kind, it tends to be projecting, what's going on inside of them. And my mother kind of, taught me to put myself in someone else's shoes. And she did that from the very onset.
Yeah, and all right, so you learned grit from your high school football coach. What position did you play? And tell us some of the lessons learned there.
Yeah, so I played fullback and inside linebacker in high school. I played outside linebacker in college, and I didn't realize that I had a toughness issue, frankly. I mean, I thought I was a tough kid. I mean, I grew up, my father wasn't in the picture for, most of my, probably from about 8 years old and on. And she married my stepfather. So a couple years there was just her and I thought it was pretty tough. There were times where, she couldn't make the rent, and I'd confront the landlord at 8 years old and tell him to leave my mom alone. And, I wasn't afraid, and I thought I was pretty tough. And then I got to my first practice with him and realized that I had a long way to go. That I was, that I had placed limits on myself that, were artificial. That, I thought I could deal with pain better than most. I probably could. But he taught me to push through that. Probably more so than I should, to this day. So, there's probably there's a practical limitation to that. But, I think those lessons, when I think of the people who are most impactful in my life that are not related to me, he's in the top five. And that wasn't, I don't think that was his end game. I mean, his end game was to win football games. But I think he developed men better than he probably expected he would.
Yeah. Those are certainly lessons at a young age that stick with you. As you mentioned, you and I are both very similar age. I'm 51, you're 52, and these lessons stick with you. We talked about earlier, making decisions, right, and then sticking with it, and then being accountable either way. What's a decision, maybe a tough decision that you've made that helped shape your career, and how did that sort of come together and pan out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think deciding to come to Benchmark was probably
Yeah.
a big one. So, we were down here. We had already invested in a bunch of properties down here when we were still living in New York, and we'd vacation down here. And we were sitting here. It was beginning of January of 2015, and looking at the weather up in New York, and it was like -2, and it was 72 and sunny in St. Pete, and we're looking at each other saying, "What are we doing? Why are we going back?" So we made the decision that we were going to come down here, be down here within 3 months. So we had to get the house on the market and look for jobs, and we had jobs, good jobs. So when I found Benchmark, it was a gamble. I mean, they were early in their development. They had done quite a bit in terms of laying the foundation, but it was a bit of a gamble. It was a career shift. I hadn't done this work before. I've done a lot of work around the periphery of this and probably had the translatable skills, but never like demonstrated that I'd be successful in this. But we took a real gamble. I had other options that were probably closer in line with what I had done in the past, but took a shot at this thing, and it was an incredible gamble and a great decision. I mean, I went from a corner office, apropos of this podcast, to a cubicle, because that's where we were in our development, and helped to shape this team and helped to drive it, and made a small impact. I believe that where we were then versus where we are today, it's incredible, the trajectory. We have our name on an arena. We were a small team, a single office, plus 2 offices in the UK at that point, and now we have offices on as many continents as that.
That's a pretty big deal, and certainly the arena, as we talked about, is huge. As a leader, switching gears a little bit, how do you handle conflict within an organization? What are some sort of techniques and tips there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I like to deal with conflict head on, right? So, and in the moment, in real time, if possible. So, while I don't seek out conflict, I'm not afraid of it, right? I do think, and I'm pretty direct, maybe sometimes a bit too much, but I do like to make sure that people understand where they stand with me, and I like to understand where I stand with them. But if there is a conflict inside the team, I'd like to actually bring the parties in and have a conversation and try to get to the root cause, right? So this can be an emotional business, right? There's some ebbs and flows here trying to sell a business. And clients can be sometimes unkind because they're going through a really difficult time, and it's very understandable, right? And this is selling something that is their baby, and buyers can be pretty terse and pretty rough. So, there can be conflicts inside of a team that are, based on emotional responses or, philosophical differences on a deal or strategy. So, I think for me, it's about getting to the root cause of it and talking it out. And, one strategy that I've kind of developed, I don't know if I got it, I'm sure I stole it from somewhere. I do it in deals and I do it in conflict all the time, is, hey, the 3 of us, let's get in the room, the 2 parties who are, in conflict, and myself as sort of the navigator, I'll call it. And let's put this problem on the other side. So not you versus you, but it's all of us against this challenge. And let's see if we can brainstorm how to solve this problem together. Do that in deals all the time where it's okay. So we're arguing over this working capital peg. Let's get on the same side and try and figure out, what the right answer is that we all can be reasonably happy with. And that's kind of how I do it. It doesn't always work, perfectly, but at least by talking it out, you identify what the actual problem is, get the parties talking and communicating with each other, and without pointing fingers. And that's really my strategy.
Yeah, that's a good point because you can isolate it then as opposed to I said X, I said Y, but if you're isolating it as a third party thing, hey, this is the situation we're at. We're 100 grand apart or whatever we are, whatever the maybe I'm oversimplifying, but like whatever the terms are, let's get to that problem.
Right. Right. And now we're all attacking the problem. The problem is the bad guy. You're not the bad guy. I'm not the bad guy. The problem is the bad guy. We're smarter together. Let's figure that.
What's on leadership and sort of mentoring and things that we've talked about, what's the best leadership advice that you've received?
Wow. There's so many. I mean, I think one of them is control the controllables. I've definitely, I lean into that one, but I think maybe the best one is be a lifetime learner. Every single day, I get something from someone. And now, whether I have the synapse firing ability like I used to incorporate it all is maybe questionable, but I'm trying. I listen to a lot of podcasts about not just about business. I mean, about everything, right? I learn something new every day by just having my ears on, just be an active listener, and just never be a finished product. Be a lifetime learner. That's probably the best advice I've ever gotten.
So, and besides obviously from the corner office, what are some podcasts you would recommend that you like? Business, lifestyle, sports, whatever. What are some go-to podcasts?
That's a great question. I mean, Scott Galloway is one of my favorites. He's a professor at NYU Stern. He tends to, if you're put off by profanity, he might not be for you, but he does it in such a way. And frankly, I do as well. I won't do it in this medium, but as an emphasis, not as being bombastic or being, or it's not a pejorative sense. He does it emphasize, but he's funny. He's an incredible thinker. He's one of the best thinkers of our time. He boils down problems. He has ideas. He's not afraid to put solutions out there. Even when he's wrong, he raises his hand. One of my favorites. He's got a bunch of different pods that he does. Scott Galloway, Prop G. I'm a big Bill Simmons fan. He's the sports guy. So I love his Rewatchables podcast on movies that we keep going back to and watching. His sports pod is actually very good. I listen to a lot. I'm a big Michigan football fan. Go blog podcast and a million business and history pods that I listen to all the time. So I've got headphones in quite often, listening to music, books, or podcasts.
Awesome. Love it. One last question on leadership. This is a deep thought one. What kind of legacy do you hope to leave as a leader?
Wow. That's a big one. Wow. Okay. So I think leaders, again, they have to inspire. So hopefully part of the legacy is that I've made people better, that I was a lever, that I didn't get in their way. Fair but firm, I think would be hopefully this is what I aspire to be. I don't know whether they'd say that or not. Decisive. I'm certainly a decisive decision maker. That's something that I've always been, and I think that's just about being fearless and not afraid of dealing with the consequences and being wrong, and relying upon yourself and your team to fix it when you are wrong. I play blackjack. Blackjack's a limited information game, but you have to have conviction that the math is the math. Even when even when you've got 16 against the dealer showing a 10, and you do it every time and you bust every time. The math says you keep going. My conviction is in the math. I keep doing it, despite what I'm getting in terms of the result. I think that's what I hope that I hear from folks, if I ever hear it. My legacy is, decisiveness, accountability, being a lever, and hopefully inspiring people to be the best they can be.
Love it. Awesome. All right. Well, before we totally let you go, what's coming up for Benchmark? I mean, it's so obvious, right? I mean, we're recording this in mid-September. This will be out. Hockey season will already be underway. So obviously, the Tampa Bay Lightning is something at Benchmark International Arena is something coming up. But you tell me and tell our audience what's new for Benchmark. What's coming up for Benchmark?
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible time for us. It's an exciting time. We have access to a building now that's going to be open 100 days a year. So you're going to see us out and about in the community much more than ever before. We're going to be opening night. We're going to have, I think 130 tickets. We're going to have a lot of people in the building, from business owners to other advisors, and hopefully we're going to help create an aura of business in that arena, because with Blue Owl being the primary owner, Mr. Vinnick, who is one of the great business thought leaders of our time, still actively involved in that business, and then with Benchmark, we do think we can create a vibe that even enhances what is the best experience in sports, and I don't mean that just because of our involvement. I mean, I'm a huge sports fan. I love everything from college football, professional football, baseball, hockey. I grew up playing hockey. I love it all. But the Lightning put on the best show in town, and it's not even close. And we hope to just add to that by creating just another element when you sort of synergize the table with what they already have that's lying sort of dormant. That's what's going on with Benchmark. We are, because of our decision to put our name on the arena, I think people are now aware of who we are. We've done 200 plus deals a year forever. That's more deals than just about anybody, but no one really knew it. So this is our way of showing the world, hey, we're really good at what we do. And we're so good that we're able to, manage putting our name on our arena, which is not an insignificant spend, built a team around that deployment. So we have folks who work full time on monetizing that arrangement, and also working in partnership to deploy that $3 million that we've committed with the Vinnick Sports Group to invest into our communities all around the three pillars of health, hunger, and education. So, that's what's really going on is us, showing the world what we do, that we're world class at it. And if you're looking to learn more about what it looks like to sell your business, we'd love an opportunity to speak with you and tell you a bit about what we do, because we do believe that the way we do it and what we do, we're the best in the world at it.
Excellent. That's exciting things happening. Dara Shareef, managing partner of Benchmark International. Thank you for joining us on the From the Corner Office podcast.
Thank you, sir. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the Business Observer From the Corner Office podcast. I'm your host, Mark Gordon. This podcast was produced by Reed Corley of the Corley Company in Sarasota. To hear more episodes of From the Corner Office podcast, go to businessobserverfl.com.